Hi friends, today we're going to talk about factoring trinomials, so three terms, in the form x squared plus bx plus c by finding the two factors whose product is equal to the trinomial. So recall how we did this one. You either did it at the area model or by the distributive property. So I'll show you with the distributive property, we did x times x plus x times 3 plus 2 times x plus 2 times 3. And then we ended up with x squared plus 3x plus 2x plus 6, which gave us x squared plus 5x plus 6. Notice that 2 plus 3 equals 5. So my 2 and my 3. 2 plus 3 equaled 5. And 2 times 3 equaled 6. So that's what we're going to use to find our factors. We're going to go backwards. We're going to start with something like this, and our final answer is going to be something like that. So again, the sum of the second terms of the binomial, which is our b in this case, is equal to the coefficient of the second term of the trinomial. So the sum of 2 plus 3, and then the product, which means multiply, is how we get 6. So if we look at some examples here, what two numbers multiply together to give us 15 and add to give us 8? Well, if we think about 15, it's either 1 and 15 or 3 and 5, and only one of those adds to give us 8. In this case, 1 plus 15 is 16, 3 plus 5 is 8, so our numbers are 3 and 5. What two numbers multiply to give us 15 and add to give us 16, negative 16? If we are multiplying to get a positive number but adding to get a negative number, that means both numbers are negative. So it's either negative 1 times negative 15 or negative 3 times negative 5. Negative 1 plus negative 15 is negative 16. Negative 3 plus negative 5 is negative 8. They said they want us to get to negative 16, so that means our answers are negative 1 and negative 5. Part C, what two numbers multiply to give us negative 15 and add to equal negative 2? If we're multiplying to a negative number, that means one has to be positive and one has to be negative. And if we're adding to get a negative number, that means we have to have more negatives than positives. So if we're thinking about 15 again, we have 1 and 15, or we have 3 and 5. We want to know which one of those is 2 apart. Because we're adding to get a negative 2, that means the two numbers are 2 spaces apart from each other, which means our numbers have to be 3 and 5. But now to figure out which one's negative, because they have to add to a negative 2, that means our bigger number has to be negative. So our answers here are positive 3 and negative 5. They multiply to negative 15 and add to negative 2. And then finally, which numbers multiply to negative 15 and add to negative 14? Again, if we're multiplying to a negative, that means that we have to have a positive and a negative. And if we're adding to a negative, that means our bigger number has to be negative. So again, we have 1 and 15 and 3 and 5. We need to know which one of these are 14 apart. The distance between them is 14. That would be 1 and 15. So if you think about it now, we're kind of subtracting to get 14. And in order to get negative 14, that means we have to have 1 plus negative 15, gives us negative 14. So our answers here are 1 and negative 15. Let's look at some examples. First thing we always have to do is write down what represents A, B, and C. Again, these are in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. Remember, there's an imaginary 1 here that we don't write down. So A is 1, B is 13, C is 36, and we need A times C, which gives us 1 times 36, which is 36. Let me make my factor diamond here. If you don't know what the factor diamond is, go back and watch the video about factor diamonds. You want to make sure you have those in your notes. A times C goes on top, 36. B goes on the bottom, 13. And we're looking for two numbers that multiply to give us 36 and add to give us 13. We know since the top and the bottom, 36 and 13 are both positive, that the sides are both going to be positive. So let's think about how we can multiply to 36. Either 1 times 36, well, that adds to give us 37. So I know that's not going to work. I'm going to put an X by that. That won't work. We have 2 times 18. Well, those add to give us 20, so that's not going to work. 3 times 12. Those add to give us 15. That's not going to work. 4 times 9. Those add to give us 13, which is what we want. So our answers here are positive 4 and positive 9. It doesn't matter where you put the 4 and the 9, they can be switched up. The reason we do that is because now we know our final answer, if we factor this, is x plus 4, x plus 9. And again, the 4 and 9 are coming from our factor diamond there. Let's look at another one. X squared plus 5x plus 6. So in this case, A is 1, B is 5, C is 6, A times C, 1 times 6 is 6. So we need two numbers that are going to multiply to give us 6 and add to give us 5. I know they're both going to be positive. So if I think of ways to get to 6, I have 6 and 1. Those add to give me 7. And I have 2 and 3. Those add to give me 5. So that's what I want. Again, since they're both positive, it doesn't matter where you put the 2 and where you put the 3. But don't forget your final answer here. X plus 2, x plus 3. X squared plus 11x plus 28. Again, A is 1, B is 11, C is 28. So A times C is 28. So I need two numbers that are going to multiply to give me 28 and add to give me 11. Since everything's positive, I know my two sides are going to be positive. So if I look at my factors of 28, I have 1 and 28. Well, those add to 29, so that won't work. We have 2 and 14. Those add to 16, so that won't work. And we have 4 and 7. Yay, those add to 11. So our two side numbers then are 4 and 7, which means our final answer is going to be x plus 4 times x plus 7. What you do in the X or the factor diamond is not your final answer, is what helps you to get your final answer. You have to write your final answer as two factors. All right, these ones are B, or our middle term is negative. Let's make sure we change this to plus negative. So A is 1, B is negative 11, C is positive 18, and then A times C, 1 times 18 is 18. So I need two numbers that multiply to give me 18 and add to give me negative 11. According to our factor diamonds, if the top is positive and the bottom's negative, both of these side numbers are going to be negative. After I put in the two negatives there, I can ignore negatives, okay? I just need two numbers that are going to multiply to give me 18 and add to give me 11. Okay, I know that the two numbers I choose are going to be negative, but when I'm finding my factors, I'm just going to be looking at positive numbers. So to get to 18, we have 1 and 18. Well, those add to 19, so that won't work. We have 2 and 9. Those add to give me 11, so those will work. But since both sides are negative, it's going to be -2 and -9. -2 times -9 is positive 18. -2 plus -9 is -11. So my final answer then is x minus 2 or x plus -2 and x minus 9 or x plus -9. X squared minus 8x or plus -8x plus 15. So A is 1, B is -8, C is 15, which means A times C is 15. We have the same type of situation here where our top number is positive. We're multiplying to a positive 15, adding to a -8, which means these two sides will be negative. Again, once you put in the signs of the two sides, then we can ignore signs. Okay, we've already taken care of that. So we need two numbers now that are going to multiply to 15 and add to 8. So we have 1 and 15. Well, those add to 16, so that won't work. And we have 3 and 5, which add to 8. Since they're both negative, I know it will be -3 and -5. So my final answer then, x minus 3 or x plus -3 and x minus 5 or x plus -5. Let's try one more here. A is 1, B is -13, C is 42, which means A times C is 42. So I have positive 42 on top, -13 on the bottom. That means both sides are going to be negative. So now I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to 42 and add to 13. Well, 1 and 42 is going to add to 43. We have 2 and 21. That's going to add to 23. We have 3 and 14. That's going to add to 17. And finally, we have 6 and 7. That's going to add to 13. So our final answer here, if we put in our 6 and our 7, x take away 6 or x plus -6, and x take away 7 or x plus -7. All right, we can also have situations where C is negative. If C is negative, so in this case, let's write these down. A is 1, B is 5, C is -6, which means A times C is -6. So if I draw my X here, I have -6 on top, positive 5 on the bottom. If this is the case, we have one positive and one negative, but the positive is going to be the bigger of the two numbers when we find our factors because we need to add to a positive 5. That means we need more positives than negatives. In this case, now that we have the two signs put in, the positive and the negative, I want to do two numbers that, again, we're ignoring the signs here now, that multiply to to 6 and subtract. If the signs are opposite, like this case, one positive, one negative on the sides, then we're subtracting to the bottom number. So two numbers that multiply to 6 but subtract to 5. Well, there are two ways to multiply to 6 are 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. If I do 6 minus 1, I get 5. 3 minus 2 is 1. We said we wanted to subtract to 5. So our answers here have to be 1 and 6. And we said the bigger number has to be positive. So positive 6 and negative 1. If we check our work here, they multiply to the top. They multiply to negative 6, and they add to 5. So our final answer here, x plus 6, x take away 1, or x plus negative 1. Let's try a couple more like this. A is 1, B is 6, C is negative 16. So A times C is negative 16. So we have a negative 16 on top, positive 6 on the bottom. Again, we have one negative and one positive, but the positive is bigger. Since our factors are going to be one negative and one positive, we want to multiply to 16 and subtract to 6. So I have 1 times 16. If I subtract those, I get 15. So I know that won't work. 2 times 8. If I subtract those, I get 6. Oh, yay, that's what I wanted. The bigger number has to be positive, so positive 8 and negative 2. So we have x plus 8 and x take away 2. In this case, A is 1, B is negative 2, oh, not negative 2, negative 5, and C is negative 14. I forgot to change these, negative plus negative. I should have done that over here as well. So in this case, A times C, 1 times negative 14 is negative 14. So here, when I put them into my X or my diamond, I have a negative number on top and a negative number on the bottom. So we're still going to have one positive and one negative, but in this case, my negative is going to be my bigger number. So now that I have those worked out, that one's positive and one's negative, I can look for two numbers that are going to multiply to give me 14, but subtract to give me 5. So if I look at my factors of 14, I have 14 and 1. Well, those subtract to give me 13. 7 and 2. Those subtract to give me 5. So now I know my factors are 7 and 2, but I said the bigger one has to be negative in this case. So negative 7, positive 2. My final answer then, x plus 2 and x take away 7, or x plus negative 7. Let's look at another one. A is negative 1. Nope. A is positive 1. B is negative 6. If I change this to plus negative. C is negative 7, which means A times C is negative 7. So I'm looking for two numbers. We have negative 7 on top, negative 6 on the bottom. So one positive, one negative. In this case, the negative is the bigger one because we're going to a negative 6. Now that I have the sides figured out, I can ignore the signs of the top and bottom and just think to myself, I need two numbers that multiply to 7 and subtract to 6. Well, the only way to multiply to 7 is 7 times 1. If I subtracted those, I would get 6. But we said the bigger one has to be negative. So -7, +1. X plus 1, X take away 7, or X plus -7. Ooh, this is a challenge. Notice this is not in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. So we need to see if there's any common factors we can take out. I know x cubed is x times x times x. 3x squared is 1 times 3 times x times x. And then -40x is -1. And if I did the prime factorization of 40, I would get 2 times 2 times 2 times 5 times x. So if I look here, I have a common factor of x, which I can take out. If I take out an x, I'm left with x squared plus 3x plus -40. And now I can factor that, the x squared plus 3x plus -40. A is 1, B is 3, C is -40. So A times C is -40. So we have -40 on top, +3 on the bottom, which means I have 1 positive, 1 negative. The positive number is bigger. So now I need two numbers that are going to multiply to give me 40 and subtract to give me 3. Well, I know I have 40 and 1. Those subtract to give me 39. I have 20 and 2. Those subtract to give me 18. I have 10 and 4. Those subtract to give me 6. I'm getting closer to 3. And finally, I have 8 and 5. Those subtract to give me 3. We said the bigger one has to be positive, so +8 and -3. Now our final answer, we still have the x on the outside. Don't forget about that. And then x plus 8 and x take away 3, or x plus -3. That's my final answer. Most of you, if you get this one wrong, it's going to be because either you forgot to take out a greatest common factor, or you took out the greatest common factor but forgot to include it in your final answer. All right. A lake has a rectangular area roped off where people can swim under a lifeguard supervision. The swimming section has an area of x squared plus 3x minus 40. So that's this section right here, with the long side parallel to the lake shore. What are the possible dimensions of the roped off area? So x squared plus 3x minus 40. And actually, I think we just did that same one up here. Yeah, x squared plus 3x minus 40. So we just figured this out, that the top is -40, the bottom is +3, and the sides were +8 and -5. So the possible dimensions then are x plus 8, x minus 5. And it says how much rope is needed for the 3 sides that are not along the beach. So we know then that this part is x plus 8, and then the 2 sides are x minus 5. We don't have any rope along the beach, so there's only 3 sides. So now I just have to add all these up. X minus 5, let's call that x plus -5, plus x plus 8, plus x plus -5. And combining like terms here, x, and x. is 3x plus negative 5 plus 8 plus negative 5 is a negative 2. So 3x plus negative 2 feet. They're telling me that it's in feet. All right, friends, that's it. Again, make sure if you have not written down the 4 different types of factor diamonds that you go back and watch that video so you have that down on your notes.